1 minute to live. You're in there plotting on y'all graduation food. I gotta get into it.
Good evening. I'm your host, Karen Hudis, and this show is the 22nd segment in the series on the network of global corporate control. Today, we're going to discuss how many politicians and other civil servants have been betraying the trust of the people by secretly working for the network of global corporate control. These traitors are in default, and they are going into bankruptcy if they don't start doing their real jobs. Let me give you a little bit of background. And by the way, I'm feeding in some of the feedback that I've gotten from posting the tapes that we did. We post them at the end of every month, and I have posted the tapes that we did in August, and at the end of this broadcast, we're going to start working on posting the tapes for September. Those tapes include secret societies. One of the tapes that we posted for August has been censored by YouTube. YouTube is owned by Google, and they are part of the network of global corporate control. The network, this is a huge conglomerate that was trying to hide from us. Three mathematicians, Stefania Vitali, James Glatfelder, and Stefano Battiston at the Federal Institute of Technology in Zurich, Switzerland, found out that, you know how they talk about too big to fail? Well, there's more than what's going on is really that there's only one company that's connected. What they've done, this network, is they've taken the same directors and they've put them on interlocking boards of 40,000 companies that are traded on the world's capital markets. At the center of this huge conglomerate are the banks, and these banks print paper money. And these banks get to keep the difference between what it costs to print the money. And some of the money isn't even printed, it's just digital and goes up through their computer screens. The face value of the currency is then, they're charging interest. This is a huge scam. It's worse than a Ponzi scheme. And they call this scam country debt. They throw Greece into default. They starve the Greek citizens. They increase the rates of suicide in Greece, and all of this is just a mirage because the world's international monetary gold reserves are actually, they're safe. Many of them are buried in the Philippines, and I am the lawyer for these international monetary gold reserves. How did I get this job? It was actually nothing that I planned on because I didn't know. When I was working in the World Bank legal department for 21 years, I didn't know about this trust. But in 2013, I was fired in 2007 because I was working together with other whistleblowers at the World Bank and IMF. I knew that the corruption inside the World Bank was something that could be resolved because there was a political scientist named Jacek Kugler who came to the World Bank in 2004. And I worked together with Jacek on a very accurate and powerful model. It's called the power transition model. In the past couple of weeks, I have been telling people about exactly who in the Department of Defense is behind this model, commissioned the model, and knows what it means. This model tells us when there are traitors because it can tell us what's in the interest, the best interest of the United States, and when we don't follow our best interest because of the traitors at the top. That's what the model tells us. And what I did this past week, because I've been, as you see from the series, you can go back to the very beginning, although you'll find that the very first tapes that I did on YouTube, they've been censored. The sound has miraculously disappeared. I'm now looking for another host to put all of the uncensored tapes up. And some of the people, some of the feedback, you can go on the YouTube website and you can see the questions. And by the way, if anybody has any questions, you can, if you could put the email address, if you just send me an email, I'll be happy to answer those questions. I've been working in the very center of all of humanity we've been collaborating because this power transition model predicted that coalitions would form to take back our rule of law, and at the same time, we're taking back our gold, because I found out in 2013 that the reason for the World Bank and IMF to exist was so that at the end of a 50-year period, the world's international monetary gold reserves could be dealt with in a peaceful way. After 50 years, nobody owns those gold reserves. There are people who are claiming they own them. They don't. And what you have seen in some of the previous episodes is how I've been working together with all of the ministers of finance and development. There's 188 of them. We've been working to frustrate the network of global corporate control that is trying to tell fibs and convince everybody that for one reason or another, it's their gold. It's not their gold. That gold belongs to humanity. Humanity is the beneficiary of these international monetary gold reserves. And we are simply taking them back. And what I did at the very beginning of the week was, because I'm just there accepting emails, some of the very smartest people in the world have been helping me, telling me what I needed to know, because I didn't know in the beginning exactly how this was going to all work out. I just had faith, because of this very powerful model, that it was doable. And so what I did was I followed that good advice. The advice was to use the common law. The common law is the law that has been in effect for thousands of years. That's what law was used when the Magna Carta was agreed. And what happened with the Magna Carta was, at the end of that, King James was thrown into default, and he signed away the rights of all of the people in the United Kingdom to the Vatican, and the Vatican has been enforcing those rights. And our legal system and the lawyers who are supposed to be working for all of us are actually working for this network of global corporate control that stretches way, way back. And the network is in charge, has been in charge, has bought up all of our media, and the alternative media as well. About 10 or 20% of what you hear on the alternative media is for real. And I wanted to thank DCTV, because this, what you're hearing from me, is for real. It's because I'm working together with coalitions that have formed, and these coalitions include all of the countries and all of the ministers of finance in the countries. And you can see through my correspondence exactly, and the correspondence is out there on the internet for everybody to see, and as I said, I'll answer questions on that. You can see exactly how this coalition is operating. And the reason that we have this gold is because of a hero named Jose Rizal, who between 1942 and 1949 was the superior general of the Jesuits. And this position is also known as the Black Pope. The Global Debt Facility is our patrimony, and it includes some recent finds, including there's a train that's buried in a tunnel between two cities in Poland, and one of the art treasures on that train belongs to Russia. It's from the Catherine Palace. I forget the exact name of that palace, but this is the Amber Room, and I've written to all of the embassies that are involved with this find. I've written to the Polish embassy, I've written to the Swiss embassy, because at the World Bank, The 8 biggest countries get their own executive director. There are 25 executive directors, and the other countries are put into constituencies. And so Poland's constituency is headed by Switzerland. So I wrote to the Swiss embassy, and I've also written to the Russian embassy, obviously, to tell them that it's their obligation to include me as the lawyer for the global debt facility in all of the discussions on the disposition of these fines. And frankly, I believe that these countries are revealing these fines. They've obviously known about them using radar, but they're bringing them to light now in order to make sure that everybody knows that the global debt facility is real and that all of the facts that I'm telling you and all of the correspondence that I'm showing you is for real. One of the more interesting pieces of criticism was when somebody accused me of forging my own signature. How can you forge your own signature? So in the next segment, we're going to be talking a little bit about logic. But in the meantime, let me focus a little bit. Let me drill down on what these commercial liens are. Using the common law, I wrote an affidavit, and all of the facts that I've been telling you as facts, I sent to these traitors that were working for the network of global corporate control instead of doing their real jobs. So when people say, well, these positions, these people in authority, so for example, the Secretary of the Army, John McHugh, they're immune. But when they are traitors, they're not acting in their capacity as Secretary of the Army, and they're personally liable. And they thought that the network of global corporate control was going to protect them. They thought the network of global corporate control was above the law, but they're not. And so I wrote all of these facts. I sent them this commercial lien on the 5th of September. And the man who's been helping me, Bruce Lewis, had given me a lot of drafts that I had been marking up, and then all of a sudden he disappeared. I was very disappointed. I told Mark Dillon, who was the one who had introduced Bruce Lewis to me, that this man was obviously switching gears. He was working for the network of global corporate control, and it was my obligation just to go forward as best I could without him. And it was only several days later that Mark found out what had happened to Bruce. Bruce was arrested because Bruce does not have a driver's license. He says that his right to drive is something that the state is not entitled to license. So he was arrested and thrown in jail, and we only found it after, and Bruce was injected several times with all kinds of things. He was made to sleep on the floor. Anyway, Bruce's feeling is that the fact that I went ahead and filed those commercial liens on the 5th of September was what saved his life. In any event, Bruce got out of jail, helped me with the second and third notice, and a lot of people have been speculating why Janet Yellen, in the middle of a speech a couple of days ago on the 24th of September, choked, couldn't finish her speech, and it may very well be that the pressure of knowing that she's now personally liable for keeping the world's monetary gold reserves away from humanity. She's on the hook for 1,800,000 metric tons of gold. And people say, well, how can there be so much gold? We've covered the subject of gold, and as a matter of fact, YouTube censored that video, took 15 minutes from a half-hour video, thought you didn't need to know those facts. That's preposterous. Obviously, they're not in charge of what people think. They're not in charge of what people are entitled to know. And we will put those videos up. One of the criticisms that I got was that the videos were not in the proper order. They weren't edited properly. This is because I'm not financed by the network of global corporate control. I'm simply doing the best I can with the help that I get, for which I'm very, very grateful. In 1976, when I was a law student at Yale, I studied something called the Group of 77. That's 134 developing countries. that have formed a coalition. They're called the Group of 77. At first, I thought it was because it was in 1977 that that group gelled. But no, it turns out that there were 77 countries in 1964 when they first started. It was Ferdinand Marcos that helped create that group. And that group is now helping me, at least I assume they're helping me. I'll find out, and you'll find out, because every day I post information about the progress, what kind of progress we're making. On the 9th of October, I'm going to Peru, because that's where the annual meetings of the World Bank and IMF are. I've already checked with the ambassador of Peru to make sure that there's not going to be any problem with my entering the country. And I've been in touch with the country that's now chairing the Group of 77. That's South Africa. At first, I thought it was Bolivia. I made a mistake. Bolivia was the previous chair. But all of these countries, I've written to all of the embassies by email. You see that on what I post. And I said, I want you to make your position known to the to South Africa and also to Peru, to make sure that I am not blocked from the meetings, because it's very clear that the world's gold belongs to the world's people, and it's the obligation of the Board of Governors, which is the 188 Ministers of Finance, to make sure that that gold comes out and is used in a global currency reset. And the consequences, if it's not done, are going to be dire, but because of this power transition model, we can be pretty confident that because people are hearing about this, reading about this on the internet, listening to these broadcasts, that they're going to hold their government accountable, and we are going to have the global currency reset. At which point, we're going to have to decide how to manage ourselves pretty much for the first time, because we have been managed by this network of global corporate control that has created the wars, that has put the puppet politicians in place, and it's now going to be our responsibility to do a good job in managing ourselves, and also to make sure that there's a smooth transition. What I posted today, as a result of one of the questions that I was asked, was what is the likelihood that we're going to have a smooth transition? And I think one of the biggest dangers is the fact that there are so many people that are so misinformed, and they are believing the lies that they're told from the network of global corporate control. All kinds of lies about what danger we're in, making people frightened, making people panic, and there'll be all kinds of groups that claim that they're authentic when they're really actually the top has been financed by the network of global corporate control. If you've ever been in a demonstration, I was back during the Vietnam War era, you know what a provocateur is. And provocateurs are very good at getting a very peaceful demonstration to degenerate. So the real risk, I think, is that we allow ourselves to be bamboozled and hoodwinked by people who are in the pay of the network of global corporate control without owning up to the fact that they're traitors to humanity. And one of the debates, of course, is what are we going to do with these people that have been on the payroll of the network of global corporate control? Are we going to imprison them? Are we going to punish them? And what I've been saying all along is that if we insist on thinking that we have the right to punish these people, that we know exactly what they did and we know exactly why they were guilty. And my point about it is that there are so many facts that we absolutely do not know, and we also need to get everybody's cooperation. If people know that the global currency reset is going to result in their going in jail, it's going to deteriorate, and we absolutely need to have a peaceful and smooth transition. So even though we may not like what these traitors have done, it's in our own best interest to hold off on any punishment until we're safe. And we need to be safe, and we absolutely will not be safe if we do not have the global currency reset. And what is the global currency reset? It is taking that paper money and it's exchanging it, first of all, for different paper money. The paper money that we're going to exchange it for is going to be issued by our governments rather than the private banks that are part of the network of global corporate control. In the case of the United States, this currency was actually already printed by Ronald Reagan. He was a friend of Ferdinand Marcos. As a matter of fact, I learned recently that it was Ferdinand Marcos who helped finance Ronald Reagan's campaign. And of course, John F. Kennedy had access to the global debt facility and the gold reserves of the United States, and he had issued a proclamation about that. And that's why 10 days after he had signed something called the Green-Hilton Agreement, he was assassinated to prevent us from having the global currency reset. He was going to do it much, much earlier, and we have to be sure that we do it this time around and that we do it peacefully, because otherwise we're going to go into another dark ages. And for people who tell me that that's not going to happen, they need to do a little bit of studying. They need to understand what gold is and what gold has always been. I'm getting all kinds of criticism from people who say that we don't want to have gold currency. We want to have a different form of currency. And to those people, I say, if everybody agrees that there should be a different form of currency, that's just fine and dandy. But in the meantime, we have to go with what humanity has always considered to be its currency, and that is gold and silver. And one of the other criticisms is that the World Bank and IMF are absolutely not to be trusted. It's absolutely true that since the network of global corporate control has captured these institutions through something called state capture, and they've also captured most of the governments, that the World Bank and IMF have not been fulfilling their actual purpose. But the fact remains that their articles are correct and will stand us in good stead in a transition. We can use these institutions for a transition, and we can use them in a way that minimizes their power and maximizes and decentralizes decisions back to the grassroots. The most important currency that's going to be issued during the global currency reset is local currencies from the local areas, from the villages and towns. We know how to do that. Some of the villages and towns already have this currency. And as we go forward and we learn how to have a different form of economic system, we can certainly do that. The sky is the limit for what we're going to do in the future. But we need to have a transition using the world's gold reserves. And that is what I'm going to be doing in Peru. And that's the chances that that's what's going to happen are 90 and 95%. I'm going to keep you all posted as I go forward. I'm going to be making some videotapes next week talking about issues that are very important and that I expect you'll be interested in learning about, because we need to get ourselves organized. And it's certainly not going to be up to the World Bank and IMF to organize ourselves. But as a matter of fact, a lot of what we believe to be true is preposterously false. Our health, for example, what the medical profession is, these are topics that I want to talk about. And so that during the time that I'm going to be on travel, we'll have things to keep us busy. And I've not been following the teleprompter because there were people who thought that DCTV was the one that was giving me a script. I write the teleprompters and send them to DCTV the night before, and I like to do them pretty extensively now because I do post these, and it's important, I think, for everyone to be on the same page. Some of the subjects that we're going to be talking about are, they don't, at first blush, they don't appear probable because we have been brainwashed so extensively. And that's all I ask you to do, is to put a bookmark in any of these things that seem as if they can't possibly be true. And go and discuss this with your friends and relatives, and try to see whether it could possibly be true. I wanted actually to ask Carmen whether she can post the picture of William McKinley, so you can see what we had in 1900 before the Federal Reserve, where that was the basis of McKinley's campaign. He's standing on a gold coin there. So we understand that gold is really the form of money that has been the most familiar to us. And it's also one that makes it more difficult for groups like the Network of Global Corporate Control to control us. I'm not talking about a gold standard. A gold standard is where you can take the paper currency and exchange it for gold elsewhere. I'm talking about currency where the gold is actually embedded. There's technology for that. It's called aurum. I had actually hoped to show you what aurum looks like, but the way the aurum is now being manufactured, it doesn't have doesn't have pictures on it. It doesn't look like it's national currency. But this is what we're going to have. We're going to have currencies issued by all of the nations. One of the important exercises that we're going to have to do is we're going to have to know what the gold is worth. And in the segment that was censored by YouTube and Google, we discussed what the value of gold actually is. The reason why we don't know what it is automatically is because the markets are all rigged. For every ounce of gold that's actually traded, there are many times that in contracts that are never really concluded, but they're there just to send false signals about what the price of gold is. And in the COMEX, which is the commodity exchange for gold, the actual gold in the commodity exchange has been falling precipitously. We don't actually even know how much gold is actually there. One of the things that we also don't know is how much gold is held by the Fed, the Federal Reserve, and how much gold is held in the other countries. And I can tell you that the real international monetary gold reserves are not held by the countries. They're held in the global debt facility. We had something called a notarial protest back in February, where I again wrote to the Federal Reserve and I wrote to the Universal Postal Union, and I stated what the facts were, and those facts were uncontested. I wanted to read you some of the statements that were in the commercial lien. I don't know if we can get that up on the teleprompter, but I have that here. And that is, I have notified each of the lien debtors, and some of the lien debtors, that's including Barack Obama, that's including Joe Biden, that's including Jacob Lew. I have informed them of their nonfeasance, misfeasance, and malfeasance, and given them the opportunity to rectify matters so that the World Bank can be brought into compliance on the world's capital markets, and so that the Board of Governors of the World Bank and IMF can complete the global currency reset. On August 31, 2015, I placed the following information on the Internet. The Internet is distributing this information about the Coalition for the Rule of Law, and then I had a link that anybody can access what that information is, and background research for the commercial liens to end this corruption. And there was an extensive communication to the U.S. Congress. And I'm being told that I'm being a little bit too long-winded, so I'll just have to post this teleprompter and you can see the rest of the statement. I want to thank you for listening to another segment of the Network of Global Corporate Control. We've discussed how the common law is holding the agents of the Network of Global Corporate Control accountable. If they do not allow the global currency reset to proceed, they will be in bankruptcy and will lose their homes and all the rest of their assets. Until next week, I'm your host, Karen Hudis. just looking to see what I missed. No, I covered the stuff.
Yeah, no, it was good, but it's slow. All right, 1 minute out. So we are going to start recording.
Good evening. I'm your host, Karen Udis, and this show is the 26th segment in the series on the network of global corporate control. Today, I'm going to report back on the World Bank and International Monetary Fund annual meetings in Lima, Peru, which I attended on October 9th through 11th. I met with 20 delegations and 2 ministers of finance, including India's Minister of Finance, His Excellency Shri Arun Jaitley. I'm also going to answer the question today, why is it taking so long? And what is the word it? That's the global currency reset. And this is a question that was posted in the September segments on YouTube that went up on the internet. One of the segments actually went up on an archive website because YouTube refused to take it. And one of the episodes, and I'm going to go into a little depth about what was in that episode. We are still just getting it out of the software here at DCTV. Whether it was hacked or whether we just had some technical difficulties, we don't know. But the fact of the matter is that in the last few transmissions, the portion that went out on the internet, the live streaming, was interfered with. And frequently when I post things on the social media, these links that I put, with Twitter, you're only given a limited amount of space. So I put links in, and many of the links are interfered with. This is because the network of global corporate control is trying desperately to maintain its storyline, which it does by the mainstream media, which it owns. The network of global corporate control is one company that owns all of the banks and 40% of the assets that are traded on the capital markets, and it pulls down 60% of the earnings. We know this for a fact because there are 3 mathematicians at the Federal Institute of Technology that took the data on ownership of the companies in the capital markets, and they were able to show how very cleverly there were the same directors put in a spiral of interlocking boards. So they've maintained control over our media, and they also have bought up a lot of, it's very easy actually for them to buy up the politicians and the media. All they have to do is print money because they're the 60 central banks that are members of the Bank for International Settlements. And this monopoly of information, they're monopolizing the information that people study in the universities. They do this very cleverly through tenure systems. A lot of people say this is for academic freedom. No, this is to weed out people who are not towing the storyline that the network of global corporate control wants us to follow. But since enough of us have managed to figure out about this network, we've been communicating with each other through the internet, And it's been very efficient. Many times people are posting questions on the YouTube videos that are out there. And I also want to thank DCTV for making this series possible. We've been broadcasting now for 6 months, and we're going to continue until we have finished our transition. And the way I'm very confident that we're going to have that transition is because of another very important study that we've discussed at length. This is a study that came to us at the World Bank in 2004 from the Department of Defense. Jacek Kugler, a political scientist who was the chair at Claremont University, developed a model which predicts how coalitions will form. And this model predicted that the United States was going to lose its ability to appoint the president of the World Bank. That happened in 2010. It also started predicting in 2010 when I and Elaine Colville and some other World Bank whistleblowers got statements up on the UK Parliament website, and I also testified along with other whistleblowers at the European Parliament. When this happened, this showed that there was a fissure, a break in this control of information, and we have been capitalizing on this to teach a lot of people, and a lot of people have also been studying the dominance and the control, and this dominance and control can only continue when it's kept in secret, and you can see now that it's not secret anymore. So we're on, it's like letting the horses out of the barn. You can't go back and take away this information that we now have, and we're able to see how many of the politicians are being bought off by this network. It's not just a matter of greed. There are also many of the politicians who don't follow this storyline are assassinated. That's what happened to John F. Kennedy. John F. Kennedy was going to do what we are now poised to do with our currency. The way it works with a currency is the banks print the money, and they keep the difference between the face value of the bill that they have printed and the cost. And in some cases, there's absolutely no cost because this is just a digital entry on a computer screen. And then they charge us interest on country debt. This is nothing other than a scam. And the countries of the world have realized that the people that inhabit this planet are not agreeing to continue along with this scam, and they're demanding that their wealth, which is owned actually in a trust that was put aside at the end of World War II for 50 years, and the reason that this wealth was kept secret is in order to make sure that when it came out of hiding, there would be no fights about it, because there's a concept called statute of limitations, which is if you say that you own something and you don't manage to get it back in 50 years, you've lost it. You have no more claim to it. And that was deliberate. All of the countries of the world agreed that it would be up to the Board of Governors of the World Bank and the IMF to decide what to do with the world's wealth. And then they hoped that nobody would find out. But you see, we did find out. And this means that the ministers of finance and development that are on the Board of Governors of the World Bank and IMF know that it's their job to continue with this global currency reset. So that's the wind-up. And let me tell you what happened when I spoke to some of these ministers who I have been writing for many, many years, and I've been posting this correspondence. So when people write to me and ask me what is their government doing, I give them the correspondence, and I tell them to ask that question to their ministers of finance. And just at the conclusion of the annual meetings, I got an email from an Indian citizen who wanted to know what his country's position was. Now, as we speak, there is a meeting in India of 40 different governments and some of heads of state of African countries to talk about what is going to be going on, not only in the World Bank and the IMF, but also there are other institutions that have come into being now, such as the BRICS Bank. BRICS, that's short for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, because these 5 countries, they're not willing to go along with this country debt scam, and they've made it very clear that they're not going to be dominated by this company, this network of global corporate control. And they're waiting to see whether the citizens in the United States are able to rise to the challenge and become part of this coalition. I call it the Coalition for the Rule of Law. And I think it is eminently possible for us to do this. If you read some of the comments on my social media, you will see that there are any number of people who are fully aware that the United States has got to take its position of leadership. And this is not going to happen so long as we have the Federal Reserve Bank buying off our politicians, giving us fake news, and all of the terrible things that this company does to try to keep us frightened. One of the things that this network did back on the 7th of October 2013 was they thought that the military was going to nuke Charleston, South Carolina, and we have evidence of this, and you can go back to some of the shows where we discuss this evidence. So there's no reason for us to continue in this travesty. So when somebody asks me, what has to happen for us to get rid of this unconstitutional power grabbing, and it's also a bankrupt company because there's the trust that was set up when the World Bank and IMF was created. It's called the Global Debt Facility, and I'm the lawyer for that. And so you can imagine when I went in to the meetings and I spoke with these delegations, and I have been writing to them many years about this, that's exactly what we talked about. And there's a very serious debate going on. It goes on in many ways where people are very impatient and angry. They say that since this network and the agents, the traitors that are doing the bidding of this network have been illegally robbing the world, they should be put in jail. We should be punishing them. And until there's justice done, there can be no global currency reset. And I have to tell you that is a wonderful theoretical position to take. But you have to see that we are in the middle of a world where the majority of the people don't really know what's going on. And the people that do know what's going on and try to convince the ones that are oblivious, that are just accepting the propaganda given by the network of global corporate control, there's a very strong resistance. And some of this resistance is not simply due to logic. Some of this resistance is due to technology, because there's a way to remotely hypnotize people and keep them from being curious. And having worked with whistleblowers and people all around, many of us believe that it's close to 90% of the population that's very susceptible to this technology. And if you think I'm making this up, you can see in some of the previous episodes where we're talking about the patents, and you can see some of the academic publications on this technology. It's very advanced. And so when people are wondering why it's taking such a long time, it's taking such a long time because there is a lot that this network is able to command, even though we know very well what they're doing, and a group of us can perfectly document what it is that they're doing. So if you think that we're able to threaten them and put them in jail, we're not going to get anywhere. The one thing that we can manage, because one of the conversations that I've had with various people is they're saying that the people who understand what's going on are extremely angry and extremely volatile, and they're going to take matters into their own hands because they are not convinced that things can be resolved in a legal way using our tools of law. And I have to say, quite honestly, one of the challenges I have as a lawyer is to try to speak with the legal profession to see whether they understand what people realize now, and they're able to make a transition on the side of humanity to prevent us from having to deteriorate into chaos. And I can't report anything other than to say that I haven't gotten any response. But I've been very clear to give copies of my communications, so everyone knows exactly where things are. And the reason why I'm confident that we are not going to fall into chaos and disorder is because of this power transition model, and also because of the conversations that I had for the 6 hours that I was inside the annual meetings. One of the conversations I had, I won't say which country it was with, it was an African country. It was a foreign minister who I think is probably seen as a dean. He's been in his position for a long time. And it was almost as if it was a job interview. He wanted to go with me into great depth about what my position was inside the World Bank, who brought me there, what I thought the World Bank ought to be doing in terms of the governance of each of the individual countries. And what I told him was everything that I've been saying for many, many years, that the World Bank and the IMF are not there to be a one world order. They're there to make sure that the world's wealth that belongs to the world's people is not lost, that it goes to the individual countries, and the decision about how the individual countries are governed is not up to the World Bank and the IMF. It should be up to the people inside those countries. And of course, there's going to be a difficult transition because some of these countries have been kept under dominance for many, many years. So we're going to have to try to figure out the best way to keep things from deteriorating. And I can't say that I have ready answers. Obviously I can't, but this is something that I was discussing very seriously with this Minister of Finance. One of the other discussions that I had, it was quite an interesting time to be there because people realize that there's an opening up, that the world is moving very quickly in one direction or another, that the monopolization of information has been broken. And so they were very curious to know that, they wanted information from me. And one of the most serious conversations I had was with a person who's working for the network of global corporate control, working for one of these central banks. And I had to say that if it were up to me and people could see the logic of this position, that this was not going to be something where the bankers were going to be thrown in jail, because otherwise we won't have a transition. They'll hold out, and we'll all end up with the people that are very angry out of control. That's not a situation that anybody should wish for. There are some people who say that's the only way. I personally think that the power transition model, which is very accurate, shows us that it is not the only way, but that if we do not take this possibility, that we're going to end up in something which is very similar to what happened in the Dark Ages, where our currency no longer functions, and there's no way to buy goods or services, and there's mass starvation and pestilence. That's called permanent gold backwardation. That means that the people who have the gold refuse to sell it at any price because the currency is totally devalued. So that's why it's taking so long. Let me tell you about some progress so that you can see that there's forward movement. One of the things I wanted to report is on the commercial liens. These are instruments of common law that I have placed on some of the people that are preventing the global currency reset. There's a company, Allied Barton, that's the security guards at the World Bank, and I've placed a commercial lien on that company and also some of its senior officers and board members, and also some of the people who work for that company at the World Bank that refused to recognize my security badge. Now, the way I was able to get into the annual meetings was I simply showed my security badge. And the officer there asked her superior whether that was a valid badge, and of course it is. Now, when I go into the World Bank headquarters, they have the machines that are able to see whether that badge is activated. That machinery wasn't at the annual meeting, and that's why I was able to get into the meetings. And then when I was at the meetings, I picked up one of these bags that had an invitation in it. Excuse me, I picked up a sinus infection, so I'm just at the tail end of that. Anyway, so I picked up this bag, and inside it was an invitation from the president of Peru, Mr. Humala. And so I sent a number of emails to his people, and including posting that on the internet, saying that I had the invitation and did it extend to me or not. So I went to the cocktail party, which was a phenomenal affair, and you could see just how talented the people in Peru are. It's an ancient civilization and wonderful music, and wonderful food. So I was there for about an hour when the same man who threw me out of the meetings, illegally by the way, because I'm one of the 7 individuals who is permitted to access the information on the accounting for the global debt facility. There are 6 executive directors on the board of the World Bank, and I'm the 7th individual who has access to that information. It's called the gray screens on the banks. So this man, Gordon McIntosh, saw that I had the invitation, which I was showing to the police, who because he had complained that I wasn't a person who should be admitted. But you see, the decision about who to extend an invitation, this was up to the president of Peru. It was not up to Gordon McIntosh or the Network of Global Corporate Control. So anyway, Gordon and I got into a wrestling match. He had, really manhandled me when he tried to get my security badge away, but I was ready for him with the invitation. So when he grabbed it, I just simply put my shoulder against him, and I grabbed it back, and the thing nearly ripped. But in the meantime, the police saw that this was violence and that I was the one that had the invitation and that Gordon McIntosh was out of line. So then I spent a good 2 hours talking to the people in Lima, the Metropolitan Police, explaining to them who I was. And although Gordon had stolen my security badge, he hadn't stolen my laissez-passer, which showed 20 years worth of visas going in and out of countries on a UN passport, because I was at the World Bank legal department for 20 years. So they could see that I was somebody who had a position inside the World Bank. And I explained to them that I was there to give back the Inca gold, and that all of the countries of the world were supposed to be doing exactly that. And did the president of Peru think that his people should get back the Inca gold or not? And at the end of the interrogation, the police drove me back to my hotel. So I would say that Mr. Humala has a serious situation on his hands. I've been writing all of this up on the internet, and one of the things that I posted was it was a translation of some of the things that I wrote into Spanish by a person who was writing to his government, including a member of parliament in Peru. And I also included in that something in Dutch from a person who was saying that the 200-year celebration of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, that they were not really democratic, they were more demagogues. And I also had correspondence from Canada, the Committee on Monetary and Economic Reform. These people are suing in the courts because they don't think that their central bank is entitled to keep the interest that they're charging. That's not the way it was before '74. So you can see that all of the people are working together in a very coordinated way to repudiate this illegal grab for power that has no legitimacy. No legitimacy. They've been using a maritime law system saying that the people on Earth are actually they're underwater and should be governed by the law of the sea rather than common law or other municipal laws. I wrote the American Bar Association about this because somebody who saw what I did on the commercial liens decided to have commercial liens against some of the leadership of the American Bar Association. And I point blank asked the American Bar Association when they were going to admit how they are defrauding the American people. The courts in the United States, as we've discussed, are not the courts that are guaranteed under the Constitution. And one of the most the posts that went completely viral was when an article in Russia Today was talking about a survey of American citizens whether they would support a coup if the government were acting against the Constitution. And 43% of them said yes, they would support a coup. And so what I did was I went in there and I said, there's no reason to have a coup. We can have a perfectly legal transition. And what has to happen is there has to be an agreement to accept the gold that's on offer from the Global Debt Facility. So I have, at this moment, I've bankrupted John Reimer, the Inspector General in the Department of Defense, who refused to reinstate Vice Admiral Tim Giardina and Major General Michael Carey. These heroes were fired in violation of the personnel policies of the military when they refused to nuke Charleston, South Carolina. And Martin Dempsey, the former chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and John McHugh, the Secretary of the Army, they're trying to surrender military might of the United States because, as we've discussed, the Federal Reserve note it's going to crash. So I've asked the chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Joseph Dunford, and the vice chairman, and also Paul Selva, the Army Chief of Staff, and General Mark Miley, Marine Corps Commandant, and Lieutenant General Robert Neller, Chief of Naval Operations. I've asked all of these people whether they are traitors or whether they are going to accept the gold that John F. Kennedy had accessed 8 days before he was assassinated. And we will find out from them whether they will or whether they won't, and we will know what to do if they won't. I'd like to thank you for listening to another segment of the Network of Global Corporate Control. This has been, I've deliberately not followed the teleprompter, and that is because of advice that I received from a teacher who's actually homeschooling his child now, who said that I should speak from my heart because that was the best way to communicate to people. What people have to realize is that I am simply somebody who was lucky enough to sit in a very strategic place at the World Bank in their legal department. And because I'm curious, and because I was brought into the World Bank, because I was interested in seeing how the developing countries who had been organized by Ferdinand Marcos, and he knew that they needed to have a coalition in order to accept the world's gold that was being put in sequestration. So I was brought into this position because I was somebody who demonstrated that I could understand some of the challenges. And I've simply been trying to get information from the very center of the international financial system to the people at the, the people at the grassroots, and vice versa. And that's what I'm going to be continuing to do because of the DCTV. And so you should stay tuned, and we will hopefully all work together on the upcoming global currency reset. Until next week, I'm your host, Karen Hudis.